Yo, what up, what up? This is Matt. We're back for some uh, counter burn in standard. I'm going to play another standard brewski here. And this is something, one of the ways I brew, aside from just picking an archetype or seeing an obvious combo and trying to kind of like flesh it out, one of the things I like to do when I'm brewing is pick a card that I think is interesting and try to find a place for it where there might not be an obvious one. And so what I was thinking about was this card here, Mind Swipe, which is cool in theory, right? In practice, it's kind of just an expensive counter spell that's a soft counter spell and doesn't always do what you want it to do. So it's not perfect, but it is kind of cool. It's got a Rattleclaw Mystic on it shooting a fiery claw out, like Crater's Claw, actually. Kind of, now that I think about it, that's kind of clever, right? And, you know, trying to think of, well, what kind of deck would want a counter spell that does damage? And I was thinking, back in the day, you could make a pretty convincing deck out of just counter spells and burn, right? Like bolts, counter spells, and various variations of those cards. And a finisher would be like a fireball or something like that. And so this kind of serves that role in a little, in a sense. Or it's just like, you pay for and you counter somebody's spell and you shock them. Well, what kind of deck would want some incremental damage? Well, a deck that's got a bunch of burn spells, right? So a deck that can win by burning to the face. So this was my plan with this deck. Make a deck that can control the board with counters and burn and finish by burning you to the face. So how do we do that? Well, we got Jeskai Charm is the only... I've splashed white for this because it can act as a stalling removal-ish type spell, or it can do 4 in one shot, which is good for one card. The third ability is largely irrelevant in this deck because there are only 2 actual creatures in the deck. I'm sure there's a corner case in which it could come up, but you're more likely to want to use mode number 1 or 2 on this spell. How else are we burning? Well, Lightning Strike, we got a couple of those, or a few, rather 3 of those. Anger is there to control the board. Stoke is there as burn to the face. Riddle of Lightning, which I think is just an insane card, which I had no idea was an old card, right? Like, I never saw this version of it because I wasn't playing when that set came out, but when I saw this, I was like, I have to build around that card too. So, Riddle of Lightning, obviously at its best in a deck with a bunch of expensive spells, right? But you don't want to fill your deck with just expensive spells because you won't live long enough to get there. So that's why there's the Angers and the Strikes and then the cheap counter spells. Stroke is just efficient in the late game. Nullify is a good early one. Dissolve is a good early one. What are our big spells for Riddle? Well, if you Riddle and you hit a Riddle, that's not bad. 5 for 5, I'll take it. It's a Lava Axe that, has scryed you into another Lava Axe. That's kind of cool. But you can also use it as a removal spell, and there are a lot of big things to hit. There's 6 8-drops, and there's 4 7-drops also. So there... actually, I forget how I came up with the numbers, but the math I did, it ended up being that, like, about 50% of the time you're going to hit, a 7 or 8. And I felt like that's good enough for that to be powerful. Dig does what it does. It's the perfect control card. It's amazing. Finds you exactly what you want. Cruise just gives you more. So I did an even split of those. Volcanic Vision is just insane. It's Plague Wind for 2 mana less that also draws you your most powerful instant or sorcery. So usually you're doing this, getting back a Digger Cruise, wrathing opponent's board, and grabbing a very powerful card draw spell to kind of like put you over the top. So if you're ever casting this against a creature deck, it's very likely you're going to win the game after you cast this. Pearlink Ancient is there as a 2-of, as a finisher, toward the end of the game. You have a ton of lands in play, so you can keep this alive. Your deck has 34 non-creature spells, so you can trigger Prowess very quickly. So this just ends the game. This is like, okay, you're out of cards, I've killed all your dudes, I'm going to end the game now. Boom, play this, end of your turn. My turn, attack and cast Just Sky Charm and hit you for 11 or whatever, and you're dead, So I didn't really put a ton of thought into this sideboard. It's just a couple of, random burn spells and whatnot to try to, like, if we want to adjust slightly what we have going on. It's kind of a cohesive game plan. Probably don't want to mess with it too much. I'm sure there are other things that this was the case of there being too many options, and I know there's probably you could take a deck like this in more than one direction. You could add more creatures, and then you get into more of a mid-rangey kind of thing. You could add, more top end or whatever. I tried to go with a traditional, like, counter burn archetype. That was my plan. So taking it back to the old school. So let's see how the deck works in action. I'll play a couple games. Let's hope they go well. I've actually, in my practice matches, I have to say it's played out really, really well. Any game that I lost was a game that I felt like I could have won. So pretty interesting deck. I think it's better than it looks.